Imagine this. You're facing a trade war with one of the world's biggest economies, and you're stuck with tariffs on everything from steel to maple syrup. But instead of crumbling, Canada turned this crisis into an opportunity. How did it not only survive, but thrive in the chaos? The answer lies in unexpected allies and strategic moves that'll make your jaw drop. Stick around as we reveal the countries that became Canada's secret weapons. And trust me, you won't believe who came to the rescue. Number 10. Let's start with the European Union. In the chaos that followed US tariffs, Canada found its escape route in Europe. When the US raised barriers, Europe opened its arms. And trust me, it wasn't just the big players benefiting. Canadian exports to the EU shot up over 25%, reaching tens of billions of dollars. How did this happen? It's all thanks to the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, or CETA, a deal quietly signed years before the storm hit. Exports of seafood, aerospace equipment, medical tech, and even agriculture surged. And it didn't stop with the major corporations. Small Canadian businesses found new customers in cities like Amsterdam, Milan, and Stockholm. Canada's farm products were now filling European shelves, replacing local goods. When the US closed its doors, the EU rolled out the red carpet. Number 9. Mexico, Canada's unsung hero in North America. As the US became more unpredictable, Mexico's trade relationship with Canada became essential. Under the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement, or CUSMA, Canada found a stable, reliable partner right next door. In 2024, Canadian exports to Mexico hit record numbers, fueled by demand for aerospace components, machinery, and agriculture. But here's where it gets really interesting. Mexican manufacturers started working more closely with Canada, creating joint ventures in automotive and electronics. Canada was no longer just a trade partner. It became an essential supplier for Mexico's rapidly expanding manufacturing sector. This wasn't just about survival, this was opportunity. And while the US focused on its internal issues, Canada and Mexico were quietly building a solid economic alliance. Next up, here's where it gets really surprising. Number 8, Indonesia. Not in your top 10, right? Yet, in late 2024, Indonesia became a critical partner in Canada's trade diversification strategy. The Canada-Indonesia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement opened up a booming market that's projected to be the world's 4th largest economy by 2045. Indonesian imports of Canadian agriculture skyrocketed, and even sectors like education and tech saw massive investment. But here's the kicker. Indonesia's middle class is booming and sees Canadian products as premium. Canada didn't just tap into a new market, it strategically placed itself at the forefront of an emerging economy. Who saw that coming? Number 7, South Korea, a powerhouse that few expected to rise to the occasion. With the US tariffs in full swing, Canada's partnership with South Korea became more critical than ever. The Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement, signed in 2015, suddenly became a game changer. South Korea ramped up its imports of Canadian beef, wood, seafood, and more. But here's the kicker: the tech sector. South Korea's booming auto and electronics industries began sourcing Canadian resources at a higher rate. And guess what? South Korea saw Canada as the perfect partner for clean energy, AI, and even lithium, which is in huge demand globally. High tech meets high trust. And what does that lead to? A thriving partnership that survived and thrived through the chaos. Number 6 is Japan, another country that came through for Canada when the US turned inward. Japan's demand for Canadian agricultural goods, including premium wheat, pork, and frozen blueberries, exploded. But here's what's really interesting. Canada gained access to Japan's booming tech and electronics markets, industries worth trillions of dollars. Japan moved fast, and it wasn't just about protecting Canada's exports. It was about stability and reliability when everyone else hesitated. When the US made trade uncertain, Japan offered a level of certainty that Canada needed. This wasn't just a trade deal. This was a strategic partnership built for the future. Number 5, Vietnam. Once a country many overlooked, but now it's a cornerstone of Canada's strategy in Asia. With the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP, Canadian exports to Vietnam surged by 40%, reaching over $1.6 billion in 2024. It's not just about the trade, it's about investment. Vietnamese tech firms are entering clean energy joint ventures in Canada, and Vietnamese students are flocking to Canadian universities, boosting the education sector. As Vietnam diversifies away from over-reliance on China and the US, Canada has become its partner of choice. This partnership is evolving fast, and the potential for future growth is massive. And then there's Ecuador. Yeah, I know, not the first country that comes to mind when you think of trade partners. But here's why it matters. Canada wasn't just sitting back while US tariffs complicated things. It turned south, and in 2025 signed a major free trade agreement with Ecuador. This is where Canada's strategy of seeking smaller, overlooked economies comes into play. Ecuador may not be huge, but it's rich in agriculture, mining, and clean energy. Exactly the sectors Canada needed to grow. The beauty? Ecuador is strategically placed near vital Pacific shipping routes. This deal allows Canadian products like fertilizers, tech, and even machinery to flow more freely into South America. But the real question is, what happens when you create a network of trade with 5 Latin American countries in under a decade? You bypass traditional trade dependencies and reshape the entire trade game. Number 3, hold on. You're probably wondering, wait, what about China? Yes, despite the diplomatic tensions, China is still one of Canada's most valuable trade partners. Canadian seafood exports to China tripled in 2024, making it one of the top buyers of lobster, crab, and salmon. But it's not just seafood. China's demand for Canadian natural resources, energy, and agricultural products soared, even when political waters were turbulent. So, how did Canada survive when things got so messy? By thinking long-term. China isn't just a trading partner. It's a gateway for Canada's clean tech, natural resources, and educational exchange. The two countries still have a lot to offer each other, and Canada found its way through the noise. Number 2, Australia, Canada's quiet powerhouse partner in the Pacific. Bilateral trade between the two countries has increased by 30% since 2018, with Canadian exports to Australia reaching over $4.2 billion in 2024. But it's not just about commodities, it's about climate tech. As both countries double down on their net zero commitments, joint ventures in green hydrogen, carbon capture, and sustainable agriculture are exploding. This isn't just a partnership, it's a strategic alliance that's quietly reshaping the global trade landscape. Finally, number 1, the Philippines. Who could have predicted the Philippines would become one of Canada's fastest-growing trade allies? In 2024, Canadian exports to the Philippines grew by a whopping 35%. Canadian meat, wheat, and fertilizers are in high demand, but the surprise is how deeply the Philippines has invested in Canada's clean energy and education sectors. Filipino companies are actively seeking Canadian partners for everything from food security to tech. What's even more surprising, the Philippines is one of Canada's fastest-growing immigrant communities, further strengthening the business and cultural ties between the two countries. This isn't just trade, it's about building long-term, sustainable partnerships. Here's the truth that most people miss. Canada didn't just survive the trade war, it thrived. From the EU to Southeast Asia, Canada found new allies and new growth opportunities. These 10 countries didn't just help out, they became lifelines for Canada, reshaping the global trade game. So, the real story isn't about what Canada lost during the US tariffs, it's about what it gained. If this video blew your mind, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with your friends. We're bringing you the real insights, the stories that matter, and the facts that no one else is talking about. Stay tuned, because what's coming next is even more jaw-dropping.